The room was silent except for the almost imperceptible tap. Tap. Tap of a single finger on polished wood. Across the table sat General Volkov, the enemy's lead negotiator, a man who feigned boredom better than anyone I'd ever analyzed. I leaned toward the imposing figure beside me, General Thorne, my commanding officer, a man whose presence filled any room he entered. "Sir, keep cool," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "There's a hidden camera in your delegation. The enemy is signaling his asset right now to check his feed." General Thorne's eyes, chips of Arctic ice, didn't even flicker toward Volkov. He showed no surprise, only a terrifying, controlled focus. Instead, his gaze moved with a slow, chilling deliberation that seemed to suck the air from the room. His head turned right past me and landed on the one person who was supposed to be untouchable. My brother Mark, the celebrated diplomatic star who wore his charisma like a shield. Mark's confident smirk faltered, then completely dissolved. A mask of pure, unadulterated terror replaced it as he finally understood. To him, this reckoning came out of nowhere, but the first move had been made hours earlier, at a diplomatic breakfast meant to celebrate his career. The room buzzed with important voices, all of them orbiting my brother. He was holding court, of course, soaking in the admiration with the ease of someone who has never known anything but first place. He spotted me speaking with a junior diplomat and sauntered over. "And this is my little sister, Anya," Mark announced, his voice booming with a patronizing affection for the whole table to hear. "She's got the most important job of all. Just take notes and try to keep up." The polite, dismissive laughter that followed was a sound I knew well. It was the echo of every family dinner, every holiday, every time my own quiet achievements were brushed aside for his glittering ones. I felt the familiar, hot flush of humiliation. But my face remained a neutral mask, a skill I'd perfected out of necessity. My eyes flicked to General Thorne, who was observing the exchange. He gave nothing away, but I saw it, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Mark thought he was just landing another casual joke at my expense. He didn't understand that in our world, you don't call a senior cryptanalyst a secretary. You don't trivialize an embedded intelligence asset in a room filled with adversaries. It wasn't just an insult. It was a catastrophic breach of operational security. He chuckled, dismissing me as the family secretary. He had no idea he'd just demonstrated his own tactical incompetence to the one man who signs off on my SIGINT reports. To understand how my brother's arrogance became the key to his own downfall, you have to understand the two worlds I was forced to live in. To my family, my life was a settled fact, a quiet, predictable, and entirely unremarkable story they had written for me. My world, as they saw it, was small and safe, a pale gray background for the vibrant masterpiece that was my brother's existence. This fiction was never more real to them than the night they celebrated Mark's appointment to the peace delegation. We were at a stuffy, expensive restaurant, the kind with white tablecloths and waiters who moved like ghosts. My father, a retired ambassador named Arthur, who saw his children not as people but as extensions of his own legacy, stood to raise a glass. His voice, trained by decades of public speaking, filled the private room. "To Mark," he boomed, his eyes gleaming with a pride I had never once seen directed at me. A born leader, following in the tradition of our family, already shaping foreign policy at his age. He doesn't just witness history, he makes it. We are so proud. The small group of family friends applauded, their faces reflecting my father's adoration. Mark, seated at the head of the table, gave a humble, practiced nod. He was the sun, and we were all just planets caught in his magnificent orbit. I felt the familiar pressure to contribute, to prove I was more than just a satellite. For a moment, I found a small opening in the conversation. "That's amazing, Mark," I said, my voice feeling thin in the heavy air. "I actually have some news, too. I was just assigned to a new counter-terrorism task force at the NSA." The table went quiet for a beat. All eyes were on me. I saw a flicker of something in Mark's eyes. Not pride, but annoyance at having the spotlight shifted, even for a second. My father simply smiled, a placid, dismissive expression, and reached across the table to pat my hand. The gesture was meant to look kind, but it felt like he was patting a dog. "That's wonderful, dear," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm sure your organizational skills will be a great asset to them. Keeping things in order is such important work." And just like that, it was over. My top-secret, high-stakes assignment, the culmination of years of grueling work and sleepless nights, was reduced to filing. The internal ledger in my mind flipped through its pages. This was the same pat on the hand I got when my robotics project won the state science fair, the day after Mark's soccer team won a minor local tournament. It was the same dismissive smile I received when I got a full academic scholarship, while my parents took out a second mortgage to buy Mark a new convertible for his 18th birthday. The conversation immediately pivoted back to Mark's glorious future, and I simply faded into the wallpaper once more. Later that evening, my mother, Eleanor, a woman who believed family peace was worth any price, especially my own, found me on the patio. She had that worried, placating look on her face. "Anya, you know how your father is," she started, her voice a soft apology. "He's just so excited for Mark. Your brother, he carries so much responsibility being in the public eye like that. It's a lot of pressure." I just stared out at the city lights, my expression carefully neutral. I knew what was coming next. It was the same speech I'd heard 100 times before. "Your work is, well, it's safer, isn't it? More stable." Behind the scenes, she continued, completely oblivious. "He needs our support. The best thing you can do is just support him." She truly believed it. In her mind, my life was a quiet 9-to-5 desk job, free of stress or consequence. A safe harbor. She had no concept of the reality, and in a way, her ignorance was a more profound insult than my father's open dismissal. It erased not just my accomplishments, but the very danger I faced every single day. They lived in a comfortable illusion, and my reality was too inconvenient to be acknowledged. That illusion would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. My mother's picture of my safe life was a world away from where I actually spent my days. My office wasn't an office. It was a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, at Fort Meade. There were no windows, no comfortable chairs, just the constant low hum of servers, and the cold blue glow of a wall of monitors. This is where I took notes. My notes were encrypted signals traffic, microburst transmissions from hostile agents, and the digital ghosts of our nation's enemies. That very week, while my family was planning Mark's celebration dinner, I was hunting. My eyes scanned lines of raw data, a language only a handful of people in the world could read. Then I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible flaw in a transmission from a high-value target. I isolated the signal. "It's call sign Helios," I stated into my headset, my voice flat and professional. My section chief, a man who trusted data more than people, appeared behind me. "He's using a deprecated encryption key. It's a B-level mistake. It's sloppy." I paused, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up cross-referenced files. "He's either compromised, or he believes we're not watching." My chief leaned in, his eyes fixed on my screen. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. This wasn't about being organized. A single mistake on my part could mean lives lost. "Who is Helios?" my chief asked, his voice a low growl. I pulled up the assets file. "He's part of the pre-delegation team for the peace talks," I said, and the blood in my veins went cold. My chief nodded grimly, the pieces clicking into place for him, just as they were for me. "Good catch, Anya," he said. He didn't pat my hand. He didn't call me dear. He just said, "Tag him for level 3 surveillance. You have lead on this." I wasn't a footnote. I wasn't an assistant. In this world, my real world, I was a hunter of spies. For years, I had tried to speak their language of accolades and public recognition, but they only respected the appearance of power. It was then I realized I had to stop talking and start listening, because the truth isn't spoken in speeches, it's revealed in signals. After my brother's public dismissal of me at breakfast, something inside me shifted. The familiar, dull ache of being invisible for 20 years began to sharpen, crystallizing into a cold, hard point of clarity. It was no longer a matter of family drama or sibling rivalry. My long-standing hunt for the mole, codenamed Helios, and my brother's suffocating arrogance now occupied the exact same space. The emotional ledger of 1,000 slights closed, and a professional one opened. This was no longer a personal problem. It was a counterintelligence operation, and I had a threat to neutralize. My response wouldn't be an emotional outburst. It would be a quiet, methodical execution of protocol. I spent the next few hours in my secure workspace, not stewing in anger but crafting a weapon disguised as a standard intelligence brief. The title was deliberately dry, an analysis of nonverbal communication patterns in hostile negotiations. I filled it with dense academic language, but buried deep within Appendix C was a short but detailed section on the historical use of dactylology, communication by finger tapping, and percussive signaling in covert communications. It was a breadcrumb, a single specific piece of information designed to prime General Thorne to see what I needed him to see. The next step was confirmation. I found General Thorne's aide-de-camp, a sharp colonel I'd worked with on a previous operation, near the briefing room. I kept my voice low and formal. "Colonel, per Protocol 7 Delta regarding potential internal threats, I need a confirmation." He met my gaze, his own expression serious. He knew this wasn't a casual inquiry. "Have all delegation members undergone the latest counter-surveillance sweep?" He nodded. "This morning. Everyone's clean." I held his gaze, pressing just a little further. "And were any non-standard electronic devices logged on Mr. Davies's person during that sweep?" That's when his posture changed. His eyes narrowed slightly. He pulled out a secure datapad, his thumb scrolling through a classified log. He was silent for a long moment before he looked up at me. "One item," he said, his voice now a near whisper. "A custom lapel pin. Listed on his personal declaration form as a gift. It's not standard government issue." He didn't have to say anything else. We both knew what that meant. A non-standard electronic gift, on a man whose recklessness I knew all too well. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The trap was now armed and ready to be sprung. The invitations to the negotiation table had been sent. The security sweeps were complete. My brother walked into that room feeling like a king, ready to deliver a performance. He had no idea he was entering my theater, on my terms, and the final act was written in a language he couldn't read. We took our places in the main negotiation chamber, a room that seemed to groan under the weight of the history made within its walls. Polished flags stood silent guard in the corners, and the long, dark table felt more like an altar than a piece of furniture. I sat in my designated chair, slightly behind and to the side of General Thorne and my brother, the dutiful note-taker in the shadow of the giants. From my vantage point, I could see my parents in the dignitary gallery. My mother was clutching her purse, her face a mask of nervous excitement, while my father beamed, his posture radiating a possessive pride in his son, the son who was about to make history. Mark caught my eye across the shoulder of the general. He smirked and mouthed the words slowly, with exaggerated clarity. "Take. Good. Notes." It was his final, arrogant jab, a last reminder of my place in his world. I gave a small, barely perceptible nod, my expression unreadable. Let him think I was taking notes on the proceedings. My real focus was 100 times more important. The talks began, with General Volkov droning on about historic territorial rights and sanctions. His words were just background noise to me, a monotonous hum. I wasn't listening to his mouth, I was watching his hands. His left hand lay perfectly still on the table, but the index finger of his right hand had begun a subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm against the wood. Tap, 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 tap. It was so faint that anyone else would have dismissed it as a nervous tick, a subconscious habit. But I had spent hundreds of hours studying his patterns, his tells, his every subtle signal. This wasn't a tick. This was a language. The sequence repeated, slow and deliberate. My mind translated it instantly, the dots and dashes forming letters as clearly as if he'd shouted them. CAMERANOSIGNAL. He was speaking to his asset, right here in this room, telling them the video feed was down. AUDIO. Okay. The audio was still transmitting. And then came the final, critical instruction. CHECK. PIN. My heart hammered against my ribs, a steady, controlled beat. The trap was sprung. My movements were calm, measured. I picked up my pen, the same one Mark believed was for transcribing boring diplomatic speeches. On a fresh, clean page of my notepad, in neat block letters, I wrote the words that would bring my brother's world crashing down. Sir, Volkov first tapping Morse. Message, camera no signal, check pin. The mole ISS wearing the camera. IT's Mark. I didn't look up. I didn't show a single flicker of emotion. I simply reached forward and slid the notepad onto the table in front of General Thorne, placing it right beside his own classified documents. He didn't look at me. His eyes casually dropped to the page as if he were simply reviewing his own agenda. I watched as his gaze scanned the words. His posture didn't change, his hands didn't move, but a terrifying stillness came over him. The air around him grew 10 degrees colder. He didn't look at Volkov. He didn't stop the proceedings. He simply, slowly, turned his head. His 4-star gaze, heavy with the full authority of the United States government, landed squarely on my brother. Mark was still basking in the glow of his own importance, but he felt the weight of that look. He turned from the speaker and saw the general staring at him. Confused, his eyes darted from Thorne's stony face to mine. He saw my calm, knowing expression, and in that instant the truth hit him like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty, sickly white. The smug confidence vanished, replaced by the wild, cornered look of an animal. Pure, unadulterated panic took over. His hand flew to his chest, his fingers clutching the lapel pin on his suit jacket. The gesture was his full confession. General Thorne gave a nearly invisible nod to the agents standing against the back wall. They moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency, materializing behind Mark's chair as if they were shadows detaching themselves from the wall. One of them leaned in close, his voice low but firm, cutting through the droning speech. "Mr. Davies," he said, "you need to come with us." The entire room fell dead silent. General Volkov stopped talking mid-sentence. Every diplomat, every aide, every translator froze. In the gallery, my father shot to his feet, his face crimson with outrage. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" he yelled, his voice echoing in the tomb-like silence. General Thorne rose slowly to his full height, a monolith of cold authority. He turned not to my father, but to the room at large, yet his words were aimed like a sniper's bullet. "Ambassador," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable edge of command that silenced the entire chamber. "Your son is being detained on suspicion of treason." He paused, letting the word hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. "I suggest you sit down." My brother spent his entire life crafting the perfect image. In the end, it was a single, unconscious gesture that revealed the truth he'd been hiding underneath. In the moments after my brother was escorted from the room, the negotiation chamber descended into controlled chaos. Voices rose, delegations huddled together in confused whispers, and the air crackled with the energy of a crisis unfolding. I, however, was a silent island in the middle of the storm. A diplomatic security agent appeared at my side and quietly led me away from the mayhem, down a series of sterile corridors and into a windowless debriefing room. The door closed, shutting out the world. Inside, waiting for me, were General Thorne and the grim-faced head of diplomatic security. There were no recriminations, no frantic questions, only a profound, assessing silence. General Thorne finally broke it, his voice low and even. He looked at me, truly looked at me, for what felt like the first time. The dismissive glance he'd given the note-taker at breakfast was gone, replaced by the piercing gaze of a commander studying a valuable asset. "Your official title is Senior Cryptanalyst, correct?" he asked. I simply nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He gave a single, decisive nod in return. Effective immediately, that title is rescinded. "You're my new special advisor for counterintelligence." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Your new call sign is Oracle." As he said it, I pictured my parents being led out of the gallery, their faces a public mask of shame and utter world-shattering confusion. Their sun had just been extinguished. 1 year later, the memory of that room felt like a lifetime ago. I stood at the head of the heavy table in the White House Situation Room, the iconic seal of the President of the United States on the wall behind me. The room was filled with the most powerful people in the country, men and women whose faces were known to the world, and they were all looking at me. I was briefing the National Security Advisor on a developing threat in Eastern Europe, my voice calm and steady as I moved through complex intelligence data. And scattered across the table, in the hands of generals, directors, and advisors, were notepads. They were all taking notes from me. After the briefing, as the room began to clear, General Thorne walked with me down the quiet, carpeted hallway. He had more gray at his temples now, but his eyes were the same. He looked out a window towards the rose garden for a moment before turning to me. "Your analysis prevented another international incident, Oracle," he said. It wasn't effusive praise. It wasn't a toast at a fancy dinner. It was a simple, direct statement of fact, delivered from one professional to another. And in that moment, it meant more to me than every hollow compliment my family had ever given my brother. This was my tribe, A family forged not in blood or obligation, but in competence and mutual respect. My new office overlooked the Potomac, the water a calm, steady gray on most afternoons. Life had found a new rhythm, one defined by purpose and peace, not by a desperate need for approval. It was in that office, late one Thursday, that an email arrived. The sender was my mother. The subject line contained just 2 words: Mark's trial. I felt a strange sense of detachment as I opened it. The message was exactly what I expected, a long, rambling, desperate plea filled with phrases like "the good boy I know he is," and "he just fell in with the wrong people." It was a masterpiece of willful ignorance, a final, futile attempt to rewrite a history that had already been carved in stone. She was asking me to testify on his behalf, to speak about his character, to help them salvage the pristine image that had been their life's work. I read the entire message, every last self-pitying word, and I felt nothing. No anger, no surge of pity, not even the ghost of the old hurt. It was like reading a story about people I used to know a very long time ago. My internal ledger, once overflowing with a lifetime of slights, was finally balanced. It was closed. I moved my cursor over the archive button and clicked it without hesitation. The message vanished. My phone buzzed on the desk, a secure notification from General Thorne's office. A new file, a new mission, awaited. My work, my real life, was calling. My family taught me that some people are born to be in the spotlight. I learned that the people with real power are the ones who can see in the dark. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always recognized.